I was handing out paper. Index cards, in my own handwriting, one to each of them who's bringing the pancit, who's bringing the ice. My sister's kitchen, 2nd week of November. 66 years old, and passing out Christmas assignments like a substitute teacher, because in this family, somebody has to say it out loud, or nobody brings the rice. I had to go back to paper, I said. Nobody in this family texts anymore. I meant it as a joke about myself, about being the last one still writing things down. And a phone lit up on the counter, face up, between the rice cooker and a dish of peanuts. Villanueva Fam 2, 19 people. I read it upside down without moving my face. I have been a court reporter for 38 years. I have sat 6 feet from men describing the worst thing they ever did and taken it down at 220 words a minute without changing my expression, because the second a reporter reacts, the room starts performing for her. My face is the most disciplined thing I own. So I said, "Ruby, I'm serious about the cake." Everybody laughed. I stayed another 90 minutes. I ate. I helped with the dishes. I asked my sister Pearl about her knee. 19 people. My family has 19 people in it. If you count me. I got Mari alone in the driveway. She was digging for her keys, coat open in the rain, because my daughter has never once in 41 years dressed for the weather. Marisol. She looked up. There's another chat. I didn't ask it. That's a habit from work. You don't ask a witness something you already have. And I want to be honest about the sound of my own voice out there. It was flat, and it was certain, and it was loaded before she opened her mouth. She heard it. She's heard it her whole life. Are you asking me or telling me? I'm telling you. She stood there with her keys in her fist. She didn't lie. I'll give her that, and I'll go on giving her that. Yeah, she said. Since when? Mum, I don't know. A while. A while. It's just easier that way. She said it the way you'd say a room is cold, not cruel, tired. She was already half turned toward the car. I have to get Theo. He's got a thing at 7. And she got in and she went. And I stood in my sister's driveway in the rain and watched the taillights go up the hill. Here is what I did that night. I want it on the record, since I'm the one keeping it. I went home to Emile, and I did not tell him. I sat in the room that used to be our dining room, the one that now holds my steno machine on its tripod and 40 years of bound transcripts shelved by case number, and I opened the old family chat on my phone. It was still there. Everybody's names. Everybody's little pictures. And the last message in it was mine. March, 26 months earlier. Anybody know if the parade got moved? Raining like the end of the world here. Nobody had answered. I remember thinking at the time that everyone was busy, and then not thinking about it again, because life is full of unanswered messages, and I had a deposition that week in Kent that ran 9 hours. 26 months. I had been sitting alone in an empty room, talking, and thinking everybody had just gotten busy. I called Pearl the next day. My sister is 74. She has run the family calendar since our mother died, and she operates on one principle, inherited from our father, which she will take to her grave. Walangulo, no trouble. She made me eat before she'd talk. She always does. Arte, when did you start the other one? Cora. I'm not upset. I was not upset. I was assembling. It was supposed to be for a month. She pushed the plate an inch closer to me. Maybe 2. There was a lot going on. Everybody was saying things, and it seemed easier to have somewhere people could say things. Talk, she said. Just talk. And then? She turned her rings around on her finger. My sister has been widowed 9 years, and she still turns her rings. And then, I never found a good day to fix it, she said. That's it. That's the whole conspiracy. 26 months of my family living somewhere I couldn't hear them, because my sister could not find a good day. If somebody had hated me, it would have been easier. Hate is a thing you can put in evidence. I started a timeline. Of course I did. It's what my hands do. I got a legal pad and wrote down every family event I'd found out about late, or sideways, or from the wrong person. The surgery I heard about at a christening, the move I learned about when a cousin mentioned the new address, the engagement that had apparently been announced somewhere I wasn't. Each one got a date and a source. It was longer than I expected. 2 pages, going back well past 26 months. That should have told me something. It took me another 3 weeks to hear what. Emil watched me do this for 4 days. He watched me fill the legal pad. He watched me drive out to the office supply on 6th for toner on a Sunday. He did not ask what for. My husband was a lineman for Tacoma Power for 32 years. He climbed poles in ice storms and came home for dinner, and in 44 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the arguments he started. That is not a compliment. I know that now. On the 4th night, he came in with his laptop, set it on the table on top of my legal pad, and turned it toward me. "What's this?" "I asked them for everything," he said, "from my account. You can download it. Takes a day, and they email you a link." I looked at the screen, a folder, a file inside it. Emil. 2 years and 2 months of it. He had his hands in his pockets, which is what he does when he's decided something. Read all of it. I'm done being the part in the middle. What does that mean, the part in the middle? And my husband, who has avoided one specific conversation for 4 decades, looked at me and did not have it. Again. "Just read it, Cora." And he went upstairs. I opened the file at 9 at night. I was still reading at 4 in the morning. Most of it was nothing. That's the part I wasn't ready for. It was groceries. It was somebody's tire. It was Peter sending a picture of a dog he saw at the port, and 11 people saying the dog was great. It was my niece asking if anybody had a folding table. It was 2 years of the small, warm nothing that a family is actually made of, and it had been happening about 40 feet from me, every day, and I had not been in the room. And then, in the middle of a thread about somebody's birthday dinner, I found a screenshot of a text message sent by me, cropped, just my words, and the little timestamp, and my daughter's caption underneath. This is what I mean. I sat back. I know that document. I have taken down 10,000 hours of that document. That is an exhibit. Somebody had marked an exhibit and passed it around a room. I went looking. I am very, very good at going looking. By 2 in the morning, I had 42 of them. 42 screenshots of my own text messages, forwarded into a room I was not in, over 2 years, each one landing to a little chorus. "Oh my God, classic, Mari, I'm so sorry." Everyone cropped, everyone mine. I want to describe what that is like, partly because I don't think most people have had it done to them, and partly because I had never once considered that I was doing it to other people. It is being read back. I have watched attorneys do it for 38 years. You take a person's own sentence out of the afternoon it lived in, out of the tone, out of the tiredness, out of the joke that came before it. You read it flat into the record, and the person sits there and hears themselves say a thing they did not mean and cannot now unsay, because it is verbatim, and verbatim is unanswerable. So I did what I know how to do. I printed it. I have a laser printer I bought used from a firm in Federal Way when they went digital. Over the next 6 days, I ran 2 years and 2 months of my family through it. Message by message, with headers, in order, dated. I set the margins myself. I paginated. I built an index in a spreadsheet, cross-referenced by name and date. I bought a box of tabs and a sheet of exhibit stickers, the little red bordered ones, because I have 300 of them in a drawer, and my hand went to them without asking me. 1,140 pages. They went on the dining room table. I moved my machine to make room. By the 2nd week of December, the table where I have set out 38 Christmas Eves held a stack, 1.5 feet high, tabbed in 4 colors. Peter came by on a Tuesday to drop off a space heater I hadn't asked for. He stood in the doorway of that room with the heater still in his arms, looked at 1,100 pages of his family stacked on his mother's Christmas table, and said, "You working a big one?" "Something like that." "Cool," he said. And he asked where I wanted the heater. "That's my son. I want you to understand that isn't stupidity." Peter has been trained his whole life not to look too closely at what his mother is doing, because looking closely meant getting a conversation about it, and the conversations always went one way. He put the heater in the hall and he left. Emile came down every night and looked at the stack and said nothing and went back up. I felt magnificent. That's the truth. I felt the way I feel when a transcript comes out clean, that specific, private, professional joy of a record no one can dispute. I was going to walk into that house at Christmas with the whole thing, indexed, and I was going to be believed for the first time in my life. Then I got to March. Not the March of the last message, the March after, 9 months before that night. A thread I hadn't reached yet, buried under everything, with more messages in 3 days than the chat usually held in a month. Theo. My grandson had been in the hospital for 11 days. I read it the way you read something in another language, twice before it lands. Mari's first message at 11 at night, short, the way people write when their hands aren't working. Pearl asking what she needed, my niece offering to take the younger two, somebody arranging food. 11 days. Then outpatient. Then the long, slow summer of him getting better, which I had watched from the outside without knowing there was an outside. I'd seen him at the 4th of July, quiet, thinner, and I had said to Emile in the car, "He's 17, they get like that." He had been in the hospital and nobody called me. And then, 4 messages down, from my son. "Should we tell Mum?" Peter, 38 years old, asks a question, waits to be told. And 3 minutes underneath it, the answer that ended the discussion, not from Mari, not from Pearl. "Let's not. She'll want to fix it." Emile, my husband, typed fast, in the middle of the night, 3/4 of an inch of text on a phone, the way you'd say, "Don't wait up." Nobody argued. The thread moved on to who was covering Thursday. I sat in my dining room at 1 in the morning with 1,140 pages of evidence in front of me, and my legs would not work. There was no conspiracy. That's what I had come to find, and it did not exist. No meeting, no vote, no cabal. There was a question, asked once by a man who wanted to be told what to do, and an answer given in 9 words by a man who wanted, more than anything on this earth, 1 week without managing me. And they were not entirely wrong about what I'd have done. That's the second thing that happened that night. It was worse. I still had the folder open with the 42. At some point past 2, out of professional reflex, because a good reporter checks the quote against the original, I started pulling each screenshot back to the message it came from, in full, in my own phone, in the conversation it had lived in. 31 were cropped in ways that changed the meaning, cut before the joke, or after the apology, or in the middle of a conversation where Mari had said something first and I was answering it. 31 were unfair. I could have proved every one, and if that had been all 42, I would have driven to my daughter's house at 3 in the morning. 11 were not. 11 needed no cutting at all. I read them whole, with everything around them, with the date, with what she'd said before. They were exactly as bad as they looked. Worse, some of them, with the runway. "I'm only telling you what you said in August." "That isn't what happened, Marisol. I was there." She sent me a photo of her kitchen the week they moved in, the whole house behind her, boxes everywhere, her face in it, and asked what I thought. I wrote back, "Is the sink supposed to sit that low?" And there was one from a Sunday 2 years ago. She had written me a long thing about being tired, 4 paragraphs, the kind of message a daughter sends her mother maybe twice in a life. I answered by correcting a date. Not a word cropped. She had put it in whole, because whole was the version that hurt. They didn't shut me out because they'd misread me. They shut me out because they'd read me correctly, and there was no way to appeal. Now here is the part I'm least proud of. I'm putting it in anyway, because I am not going to build one more record with the inconvenient pages left out. I kept going. 11 more days. I finished the index. I built a second column cross-referencing all 42 exhibits to their unedited originals, because in for a penny. I found 4 separate times when Pearl had quietly pushed back, "She's not like that, she just says it flat." 4 times my sister defended me in a room I wasn't in, and never told me. I tabbed those. I tabbed everything. Being wronged and being wrong are both true at the same time, but only one of them can be assembled into a binder, and I have always known which one I'm better at. And I had work. December is arbitration season, and I take fewer jobs now, but I had a medical malpractice deposition in Seattle, full day, 2 attorneys, and a hospital administrator. I sat down at 9 in the morning at the end of that table with my machine on its tripod, and I watched a man in a grey suit take a woman my age apart with her own emails. He was not loud. He never once raised his voice. He had them in a binder, a real one, 3 inches, tabbed, and he took them one at a time and read them out flat, and after each one he said, "Did I read that correctly?" She kept trying to explain the day. That's what people do. There was a staffing situation that week. That's not, if you look at the next one. And each time he said, "I'm just asking whether I read it correctly." And she would say yes. And I would write down, yes. By 2 in the afternoon she had stopped explaining. She just said yes. She had a wedding ring she turned around and around on her finger, and I thought of my sister. Nothing she said was untrue. Nothing he read was inaccurate. The record was perfect, and it took her apart, and I wrote down every word of it, because that is my job. I was paid $410 for it. I sat in my car in the garage on 4th Avenue for 20 minutes before I could drive. Then I went home, and I got out my binder, and I caught myself doing something. I was marking it for reading order. Little arrows in the margin. Start here, then this one, then the Sunday one, hold it. That one goes last. I had a page of notes about sequence. Which page to open first. What to have out on the table, and what to keep in the bag until it was needed. I have transcribed that document format for 38 years. I have watched 200 attorneys prepare it. I was preparing to depose my daughter on Christmas morning. I put the pen down and sat with my hands flat on the table. I'd like to tell you it was a beautiful moment of clarity. It was mostly nausea. The Simbang Gabi started that week. 9 mornings, 5 o'clock, the church on the hill in the dark and the rain. I've gone since I was a girl. My father used to walk us in the wet with his coat over both of us. I went all 9 mornings that year. Pearl next to me, smelling like the same powder she has used since 1974. My cousins in the pew behind. Theo came twice, tall and quiet in a hood, and stood next to me and didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything either, and that is the closest I came to comfort all December. And every one of those 9 mornings, the binder was in the trunk of my car, in the parking lot, in the rain. Noche Buena was at my house, because Noche Buena has been at my house for 38 years. 19 people, 4 generations. The table extended with the plywood leaf Emile made in 1994. Midnight. Pearl's leche flan. Ruby brought a store cake. I did not say one word about it. I hosted, and I watched, and I held my mouth shut for 6 hours. I want to tell you exactly what that cost, because it's the only fight in this story, and nobody in that house knew it was happening. Peter told a story about the port that he has told wrong for 3 years. I let him tell it wrong. Antonia said our mother's kitchen was on Yakima Avenue, and it was on Fawcett, and I let her have Yakima. Mari came in with the pancit and said the traffic on 512 was terrible, that it took her 40 minutes and it takes 25, and I said, "That road is awful," and I meant it kindly, and it nearly killed me. Twice I had to leave the room. I stood in my own laundry room with the light off, holding the edge of the dryer for as long as it takes to say the rosary halfway. And around 11, my sister told the story about our father and the borrowed car, and she told it with our uncle in it. And our uncle was not there, he was still in Cavite that year. I have the letters, and I heard myself take the breath, the actual breath, the one that comes before actually. I let it out through my nose and asked her if there was more flan. Late in the evening, my niece touched my arm on the way past and said, "You're in such a good mood tonight, Tita." That was the review. 38 years of hosting, and the year I nearly took my hand off at the wrist to keep quiet. I was in a good mood. Near midnight, I ended up next to Peter at the counter. He was cutting the store cake, badly, and he said, "Theo's doing all right, you know. He's doing really good." He said it like a man handing over something he'd been carrying. "I know," I said. "I didn't know if you—" He stopped and squared the cake up. "Anyway, he's good." He had asked once, in March, at 11 at night. He'd been told no. And 9 months later, at his mother's counter, he was still trying to hand me something around the edge of it, and he didn't have the words, and he never will. I had expected to want to break something over his head. I stood there with a plate in my hand and could not locate the anger. It was in me somewhere, filed. I could not get my hand on it. He is the way he is, because of a house I ran. "Thank you for telling me," I said, and my son looked so relieved that I had to turn around and get more forks that nobody needed. At 1 in the morning, they started leaving. By 2:30, the house was empty, except for Emil asleep upstairs, and my daughter, who stayed to clean. Mari always stays to clean. She has stayed to clean since she was 11 years old. We did the dishes. She did the pans. I did the counters. At about 3:45, she was wiping down the stove and said, without turning around, "You've been weird all night." "I know." "Are you sick?" "No." I went into the dining room and brought out 2 things and set them on the table where the presents usually go. She looked at the stack, 1.5 feet of paper, 4 colors of tab. Then she looked at me, and the thing that came into her face was not guilt, it was exhaustion, and something older underneath it. "Oh my God." "Sit down, Anak." "Mum, it's 4 in the morning." "I know what time it is. Sit down. I'm going to do this badly, and I need you to let me." She sat on the edge of the chair with the dish towel still in her hand. I pushed the small one across first. 11 pages, clipped. "That's yours," I said. "The ones you sent. Not all of them. 11 of them." She didn't touch it. "I checked all 42. Against the originals. 31 of them you cut. You cut them in places that changed what I meant, and some of them you cut in the middle of a fight you started. I could take you through every one. So this is 11 of them you didn't have to cut." She stopped. 11 of them are the whole message," I said. "You put in the entire thing with what you said before it and what I said after, and they're still—" I had to stop for a second. I had not planned to. "You sent me a picture of your kitchen the week you moved in. You asked me what I thought, and I asked you about the sink." Mari sat very still. "And there's one from a Sunday. You wrote me about being tired, 4 paragraphs, and I corrected a date." "I remember," she said. "You didn't have to edit those ones," I said. "They were just true." She put the towel down on the table. "That was the hardest sentence of my life, and I want to be clear that I did not say it to be forgiven. I said it first, because in 38 years, I have never once seen anyone concede a point before they made one, and I had a suspicion about why. Then I put my hand on the big stack and pushed that across too. "What are you doing?" "It's yours." "Mum." 2 years and 2 months, all of it, indexed. That's the only copy, I didn't scan it, and nobody's read it but me. I kept my hand on it a second longer than I needed to. Then I made myself say the rest, because leaving out the ugly part is the whole thing I'm trying to stop doing. "And I want you to know I'm aware of what this is. Handing it over is also a kind of power. I get to be the one who chose not to use it. You don't have to be grateful for that. It isn't a gift. I'm just not keeping records on this family anymore. She looked at the stack. Why? Because I know what it does. I thought about the grey suit and the ring going around. I've watched it done 3,000 times. If I read this out loud on Christmas morning, I take your brother's marriage apart, and I take Pearl's standing in this family away from her, and I put Theo's whole year on a table in front of 19 people who don't need it, to get at you. And every one of those pages would be accurate. You found March, she said. I found March. Her chin went once, and she got it under control. My daughter is very good at getting it under control. She learned it from somebody. He was in for 11 days, Mum. I know. And I couldn't. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eye. I could not have you in it. I couldn't. I had 4 hours of sleep and 2 other kids. And I could not sit in that hallway and have you tell me what the doctor really meant, or what I should have caught in October, or which one of us was right about the... She stopped. I know that's not fair. I know he's your grandson. It was your father who said no. She looked up. Peter asked. Your father answered. 3 minutes. I found I could say it evenly, which surprised me. You didn't decide that. I've read it. We all let it stand, she said. Yes, I said. You did. We sat there. The dishwasher was running. Outside it was that flat grey Tacoma does at 4 in the morning in December. Not night, not day. 2 things, I said. They're not punishments, and you can hate them anyway. Here we go. I'm not hosting Christmas anymore. Not this year, not next. 38 is enough. I saw her start to argue and put my hand up. It was never entirely generosity, Marisol. If it's at my house, I run it. I know where everything is, and I know what happened last year, and I get to be right at my own table. I'm done. She didn't say anything. And you and I are finished texting. What? No more messages. Not one. If you have something to say to me, you call me, or you come here and say it in a room. I sat back. Both directions. You don't get a written record of me, and I don't get one of you. Whatever we say from now on is gone as soon as we say it, like normal people. And my daughter looked at me across 2 years of paper and said the truest thing anybody said that whole month. You're doing it right now. What? This. Her voice cracked and came back harder. You've got it all figured out. You've got the terms. You concede the exact right amount first, so I can't get a foot in. You're being right at me, Mum. In the kitchen. At 4 in the morning. On Christmas. She was crying by then, and furious about crying. You always win. That's the thing nobody can ever explain to you. Even when you lose, you win because you're the one who noticed first. I sat there and took it. She was not entirely wrong. That's the part I've had to live with. Yes, I said. Probably. That was all I had. I didn't have a better answer then, and I don't have one now. She stood up. She looked at the stack for a while. Then she picked it up in both arms because it takes both arms and carried it out to her car, and I heard the trunk. I think she took it because she genuinely could not think what else to do with it. She didn't say goodbye, and she didn't say sorry. She has never said sorry, to this day. Christmas morning came up wet and grey over the hill, and I sat by myself in a clean kitchen for the first Christmas in 38 years, and I felt nothing you could call victory. I felt like somebody who had put down something heavy she'd been carrying so long her arms had shaped around it. Here is what happened after. It's the part that matters, and the part nobody ever puts in. I was never added back to the chat. I want to say that plainly. There was no moment where somebody said this is ridiculous, and my name appeared. I waited about a week, checking my phone the way you check a tooth. Then I stopped waiting, and stopping was mostly a relief. Instead, in January, I called people, one at a time, on the telephone, which nobody under 50 enjoys. I asked each of them for exactly one thing. If something happens, If somebody's in the hospital, if there's an emergency, somebody calls me, a person, out loud, first. That was the entire settlement. 4 of them said yes immediately and meant it. My cousin Danny said yes, and then asked whether I was going to be like this about it, and I said probably, and he has not called me since about anything. Antonia said yes, in the voice people use for a woman they've decided is fragile, which is its own kind of no, and I have decided to live with it. Peter said, yeah, obviously. Then, after a second, I did ask, Mom, not defensive, he just wanted it noted. I know you did, I said. Next time, ask louder. He thought about that for a while. He said, okay, and I think he meant it, and I think when it happens he'll ask once, in a whisper, and then do what he's told, and I have decided that I will love him anyway. Because I helped make him. Pearl cried on the phone for a while, and then said she'd finally found a good day. That is as close to an apology as my sister has in her, and I took it. Mari went cold for 8 months. Not hostile. Absent, the way a person can be absent from you at a birthday party while standing 4 feet away. I went to those parties. I brought a dish. I did not text her, not once, and I want you to know how many times I wrote one and deleted it, because it turns out most of what I had to say to my daughter was corrections. In August, the phone rang and it was her, and she wanted to know whether the tent from Ruby's graduation was in my garage or Peter's. We talked for 9 minutes about a tent. She called again in September about nothing. That's the whole repair. It isn't finished. I don't know that it will be. I'm 66, and I have made a kind of peace with holding a thing that isn't finished. Emile was harder, because Emile is always harder. There was no scene. I didn't want one, and it wouldn't have worked. Instead, a week into January, I told him we were going to sit at the table on Thursday nights and talk out loud. He said, about what? In exactly the voice of a man being asked to climb a pole in an ice storm. I said, about whatever you didn't say that week. We've done it almost 2 years now. He's bad at it. He looks at the tablecloth. Some Thursdays we get 4 sentences, and he escapes to the garage. But last winter he came in from the driveway and stood there with his coat still on and told me his brother's scan had come back wrong, before he'd decided how to say it. Before he'd worked out what he wanted me to do about it, just stood in the kitchen in a wet coat and handed it to me raw, which is the single most frightening thing that man has ever done in my presence. I said, okay. I said, sit down, I'll make coffee. I did not tell him what to do about it for 4 entire days, and it was the hardest work of my life. And I don't know if he noticed. I have never once brought up the 9 words. Not once. That's the other job, and I have to do it again every week. Christmas Eve is at Peter's now, permanently. He does it badly. He runs out of chairs and he forgets ice every year. Ice, the one thing. I come at 7 with 1 dish and I leave at 9, and I've discovered I like it. I like putting my coat on while the house is still loud. I like driving home with Emile down 6th Avenue with the lights on. I like not knowing where anything is. I take fewer depositions. I turned down the January arbitration and gave it to a girl on the agency roster who's 31 and faster than I ever was. And Theo comes on Sundays. He's 19 now and steady, and he told me himself what that spring was. In his own words, in his own time, because he asked to, and I let him talk all the way to the end without correcting one date. He got 2 things wrong that I knew about. I am maybe 40% good at this, still, at 66. The other 60% I just swallow, and it goes down like a stone, every time. He asked about the machine. He'd been looking at it on that tripod his whole life without knowing what it was. So I taught him. 22 keys, both hands at once, and it doesn't write letters, it writes sounds. He's slow, and he loves it. He can do 40 words a minute and thinks that's nothing. I remember 40 words a minute. It isn't nothing. And while he practices, I've started doing something I should have started 20 years ago. I take down Pearl. I sit her in the good chair with coffee and ask her about our father coming through Bremerton in 1946, about the house on Fawcett, about the year our mother stopped speaking to Auntie Nene. And I put it down in my own shorthand, as fast as she can talk. I don't correct her. Not the dates, not the names, not the year she has now moved twice. Last week she said, our father's coat was brown, and I have a photograph in a drawer showing it was grey, and I wrote brown, and let it stand, and my hands did not even fight me about it. I spent 38 years making sure that what people said would survive exactly. I was so proud of that, and I never once, in all that time, asked a single one of them what they meant. There is a difference between hearing a person and having them on file. I found it at 66 in a stack of paper on a dining room table 3 weeks before Christmas. The record I keep now isn't built to prove anything. It's built to keep them.